Hi, everyone. Welcome to our session today. My name is Dr. Shubha Kumar, and I am a faculty with the USC Institute on Inequalities and Global Health, and also our Director of Education here at the Institute. Really thrilled to share with you today many of the education opportunities that we offer through the Institute to get engaged in global health. I'll give you guys a little bit of a quick overview, but then better than hearing from me, you're going to hear from your fellow students who've participated in these various types of opportunities and activities and have a chance to engage with us in questions. So we're looking forward to have some good conversations with y'all. So real quick, in terms of an overview, at the Institute, we provide a lot of opportunities both inside and outside of the classroom to get engaged in global health. We have an undergraduate major in global health, as well as graduate degrees related to global health, including an MPH program, a master's in public health, a master's in global medicine. And we also have specific courses as part of some of these programs where we take students overseas to experience global health in action. We offer a course to Geneva. In the past, we've gone to Costa Rica and Panama. We have a new one coming up to Ecuador. So opportunities to experience courses in combination with faculty and your peers. We also offer some unique online education courses in partnership with the Association of Pacific Rim Universities, which is a network of about 60 universities in the Pacific Rim region. And we teach courses on global health leadership and global health ethics that are joint with all these other universities. So you also get a global health experience in an online space, which is kind of an interesting way to engage. We have an annual global health case competition every spring. That is really fun for students. We invite students from all over the university to participate in this competition. They form teams of about 5 students, and you get a case challenge. It's a lot of fun, so I encourage all of you to check that out and participate if you can. We also offer Bremen Fellowships. So we've been given a generous fellowship by Dr. Joel Bremen, and that supports students to go overseas to engage in global health research and projects. We also offer a variety of internships through the Institute, including the SDG Leadership Academy, SDG meaning the Sustainable Development Goals. And we have many of our MPH students also do practicums around the world, and we will help set students up with sites to engage in global health. We offer many, many research opportunities. You're going to hear about some of those, but those can be in the form of a course, whether at the undergraduate or graduate level. They can be paid research opportunities, volunteer opportunities. So there's a lot of research that's happening at the Institute in Global Health, and we love when our students partner with us in conducting those research projects. We also have a student advisory council through the Institute, where we invite our students from across the university again to advise us on what they want to see in global health at USC. And that's a really valuable mechanism and space for us to engage directly with our students to know what you guys want and to be able to act on those. And we offer a wonderful speaker series. We have fantastic people and practitioners and experts from around the world who come and give talks, sometimes in person, many times online. Those are quite often throughout the academic year. And you get an opportunity to network with these people, to learn from them. And so there's a lot of ways to engage in global health, both inside and outside the classroom. And we encourage all of you who are interested in this space to participate. So with that said, I'm going to now turn it over to our first student speaker. Wulela, if you can please introduce yourself and share with us your experience.
Yes, for sure. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm eternally grateful for this opportunity to share my experience with the Institute of Inequalities and Global Health's SDG Sexual Health and Reproductive Rights Fellowship from this past summer, so the summer of 2023. For those of you who may not know, my name is Wulela Solomon. I'm from Seattle, Washington, and I am a current sophomore here at USC studying health promotion and disease prevention. as I prefaced a bit before, I will be sharing my experience being a part of this transformational fellowship, I might say, and the lessons I learned, as well as the ways that I am applying them and want to apply them to my future. So without much further ado, let's get started. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you so much. Okay, so if you're not already aware from the title, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or as we say, SDG, Sexual Health and Reproductive Rights Fellowship was a 10-week program that introduced a cohort of about 16 of us students to critical aspects of human rights and the sexual health realm. It was incredibly fascinating to learn about monumental documents such as the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights and important organizations such as the International Planned Parenthood Federation during our time in the program. Even though we had a chunk of information to review at the beginning of every week, it was critical information that we gained from these resources. And they provided us with content that was necessary to create our products. And after some time, many of us began to understand and recognize the intersections behind the themes of the information we were given, which led to more dynamic and layered videos. Nonetheless, we had the opportunity to reflect on all the information we were learning in workshops and guest speaker events through weekly reflections and small group discussions, which I will dive more into later on. Some of the guest speaker events that were held for us included amazing individuals such as Pooja Badaranth, who is a fierce human rights advocate and is a part of the Sexual Rights Initiative, which is an organization that brings together a coalition of organizations around the world to work together to advance human rights related to sexuality at the United Nations level. Lastly, we were able to have lots of fun playing around with and utilizing TikTok, which I like to say is a social media app for creatives, to create 5 short videos per week on concepts we thought should be shared to our spaces. And I'm not going to lie, it was an adjustment to learn how to use all the features that TikTok gives us to showcase our best work. But eventually, as a cohort, we understood that if we made sure that our advocacy messages were getting out there, then we definitely succeeded in one way or another. As you can see to the right, I have some TikToks that I made with the fellowship over the summer, and you can actually watch these TikToks that my peers and I created at the IIGH main TikTok account. So definitely check that out. Next slide, please. Okay. So to go over some of the major takeaways I had from this summer, the first is definitely realizing and recognizing the benefits that come from group discussions and how much I learned from these conversations with that were led by our expert program leads, Summer Pete, Caroline Diamond, Cynthia Rothschild, and just honestly anyone in my cohort. It helped me break down these ideas that on certain weeks often felt too difficult to understand, such as how we can decriminalize sex work as youth. And it exposed me to new perspectives that I would not have come across before in my daily life and daily work, I guess. Additionally, with the group discussions, I was able to understand how social media could be used as a tool for good. And it could reach many different audiences based on the way we set up our advocacy content. In fact, in one of my favorite communication workshops over the summer, we discussed the difference between a primary and secondary audience. So it taught me by generating a target audience and creating a video around that target audience, we may also have a secondary audience that we may not be aware of and would also be willing to hear our messages. So we're just getting more information out there, which is super exciting. And lastly, I learned that there is still so much to learn. Every document we went through or discussion we had in the program, there's just so many more additional resources to check out and comprehend, which solidified that these conversations around human rights concerning sexual and reproductive health shouldn't just end at one moment and at one time. They should be continuous and are critical to maintain. In fact, this realization was so strong for me that it drove me to apply for and become a member of the Student Advisory Council under IIGH, as I knew it was a space and has been a space designated for like-minded students of all aspects that are interested in global health to come together to learn more about this field and discuss pressing issues, as well as be invited to interesting opportunities such as speaker events and so much more. So also, please feel free to ask any questions later regarding that opportunity. Next slide, please. To close, I want to share 3 aspects in which I feel my experience with the fellowship is being applied to currently and will be applied to in my future. The first is that I have now used the social media platforms I feel most comfortable in as a way to promote messaging on human rights related topics with more intentionality for my viewers and what I think that they should know and what should be out there. The second is that I hope to participate in further research globally that engages in this intersection between a broad topics like race and a specific focus such as incarceration in relation to sexual health and rights. And lastly, much later on, I hope to be a practicing physician who's empathetic and fluent in the social determinants of health that have proven to play a role in one's sexual well-being and apply that knowledge when supporting my future patients, I guess. Next slide, please. Yeah, so okay, that's all. I really hope you guys learned a little something about me and my journey with the SCG Fellowship as well as the Student Advisory Council, and I thank you all for listening to me today.
Thanks so much, Walela. And folks, as we said, we'll take questions at the end, so feel free to start thinking of those. And now I have the pleasure to turn it over to Kaya. If you can please introduce yourself and your experience.
Yeah. All right. Hi, everyone. And we can just go next slide. But I'm Kaya. I participated in the SDG Leadership Academy over the summer and also IIGH research. A little bit about me is that I am health promotion, disease preventions, and French double major. I'm currently a junior, and then a lot of the organizations that I've been involved in or am involved in pertain pretty much to education, spirit, and service surrounding campus. Long term, because I unfortunately am getting to the point where I have to think about the future, which is so scary. But long term, I do want to work in health policy analysis or anything related to kind of figuring out how we can integrate health equity into actual policy in that transition. Next slide, please. So I guess to start off, my journey with IIGH started in summer of 2023, similar to Walela, with the SDG Leadership Academy. And fundamentally, it's a partnership between IIGH and Durex that focuses on how we can kind of bridge the gap between social media advocacy and sexual rights. And even though it is focused mainly on the intersection between that kind of advocacy, you have an opportunity, as Walela mentioned as well, to meet so many really cool and lovely individuals who have diverse experiences working in topics tangential to sexual rights, but also just in teaching very niche nuances that I honestly hadn't learned about before. And then the secondary thing that SDG Leadership Academy really focuses on is health communication and kind of emphasizing how we can use different audiences, but also just different perspectives and values to communicate sexual rights in ways that maybe before hadn't been imagined. Next slide. Oh, wait, next slide, please. So through this Leadership Academy, there are so many things that I really resonated with and felt that I learned. On the right, you have a little snapshot of kind of what we made or what I made. And through this, so for context, my background, I come from a suburb of Dallas, Texas, which had abstinence-only education and very limited information about sexual rights and health, pretty much, which is quite terrifying going into a world where we need to discuss health equity in relation to sexual rights, but also in relation to all human rights. And so something that the SDG Leadership Academy really taught me and actually resonated with me was in defining sexual rights and being able to apply that rights-based language as using the UDHR or the Planned Parenthood Federation, those documents as fundamental documents to discuss sexual rights and kind of figure out how can this be applied in an international scale and be rationalized to maybe policy actors who don't usually think about sexual rights. But it also taught various intersections. So if you have any interest in anything related to health, reproduction, or rights in general, there's probably going to be some topic within sexual rights that can pertain to that, but it's so vast in what you can learn about. Outside of the content itself, there were two main skill sets that I was actually really surprised to have learned, which was the health communication aspect of communicating with various different audiences. So whether that's communicating with the youth, communicating with people who are in government, who are in advocacy, or people who maybe have very diverse ideological backgrounds, learning how to communicate and engage with just kind of diverse thought processes when you talk about sexual rights is really essential to create tangential change. And that was something that I learned and really inspired me in kind of shifting my career aspects actually, and like what I want to do in the future, because it taught me that even if you work within a community, the way that we talk and value needs to be aligned with whoever you're talking to. And in order to do that, we need to be able to advocate for ourselves, but also for that community and work alongside everyone. And so the SDG Leadership Academy really shaped that by forcing us to interact with digital media advocacy, which is also a new wave of advocacy. And so since then, there are two things that I feel like these skill sets, and honestly, like what I've taken from SDG Leadership Academy has applied to, which is first, my current research with IIGH, but also in shaping my career goals from like just wanting to kind of pursue either health consulting or health policy from a very like rigid communication standpoint to really wanting to pursue health equity and ensure that everyone has access to health equity. So I guess one thing I just wanted to share really quickly was, if we'll go to the next slide, one of the videos that we made through this Leadership Academy, which is kind of an approach to show how we use communication aspects. So. I don't know if the audio is going, but essentially I'll just summarize. So there are many TikTok creators who talk about discomfort in sexual pleasure, and that is something that's very stigmatized. And so this video kind of goes into ways that we can think about principles of sexual pleasure and using the Pleasure Project, which is one of those fabulous organizations I talked about, to discuss that. But it can also look at ways that we can talk about that among peers at an educational level and at an institutional level, and the ways at which the communication methods would differ considering the degree of taboo or stigmatization that might exist. And so using all of this, I kind of realized like, I want to continue this research and figure out how we can kind of discuss maybe stigmatizing topics that shouldn't be stigmatized at a research level. So if we could go to the next slide. So that led me to kind of reach out about the IIGH research project, which I have had the wonderful opportunity of working with Dr. Anderson and Dr. Gruskin. And so the project that I'm currently working on is a course review of the 2023 to 24 academic year at USC, looking at sexual and reproductive health and rights, specifically just the courses, but also looking and interacting with various student organizations and faculty to see kind of what education opportunities are accessible and available for them, and how different schools, departments, and disciplines discuss this. And the reason that this is really important to me, because there are so many applications in ways that sexual and reproductive health and rights intersect with various fields like law, healthcare, but also just very tangential things like people who just literally talk to their peers and knowing how to communicate with that. And so evaluating the education that we receive on that, or how we're taught to portray that, is really important. And so the sum of this project will be a report on current education opportunities and gaps for USC. And if we can go to the next slide, let's talk about why this matters. So this matters because, as we know, the Dobbs decision that was overturned, and in spring 2023, there was an event prior to my joining IIGH even that discussed the relevant gaps in trainings and education, and specifically found that like there was not a whole lot of education on reproductive health and abortion. And so that kind of led to the question of, okay, well, what is USC providing and what opportunities are there, which led to this research project, which was looking at courses, but also a way to kind of communicate with students of like, what do you really feel like you're getting out of SR HR education, and do you feel like that's adequate for what you want to do in the future? And through this, I've like, again, learned lots of skills. That's a very non-exhaustive list, but I think the really important part is this research project has really, really motivated what I want to do in the future, but it also has just really taught me a lot about kind of where there are gaps in education and how we can work with that at an institutional level, rather than just kind of trying to work from advocacy only on the outside. Like research in a way can be advocacy, and I feel like this project has really taught me a lot about kind of where there is room for growth, but also where there are many successes at the USC level. And so if we can go to the next slide. And the reason that I think this matters is because fundamentally there are so many applications of sexual and reproductive health and rights, long-term or short-term, whatever you're interested in. But the ways in which we talk about this are so important to creating tangible change in the realm of human rights, but also just in the realm of sexual rights advocacy. So for me personally, these experiences, which I've had over the past 6 months, which have been absolutely wonderful, have increased my desire to work in health equity, specifically from a government or policy standpoint, but also to just continue discussing human rights-based topics just in general. And outside of the professional side, which for me has been really fundamental, but also I acknowledge that like not everyone is going to want to pursue a career in like SRHR, but these opportunities, even outside of that, help reduce so much stigma, and the educational opportunities are truly, truly wonderful. I mean, there are so many amazing things you can learn, so many amazing experiences you can have that really just shape how you perceive sexual rights and how we communicate that with everyone, and how you can be a better advocate for yourself, but also for your peers. It also leads to a safe space, which I've had with many of my peers since, that leads to a type of comfort in discussing maybe previously tabooed or stigmatized topics, which is really important to creating change and kind of creating a conversation. And in both the SDG Leadership Academy and in the IIGH research that I'm currently engaged in, I've found so much joy in being able to have these conversations safely and kind of like counteract all that abstinence only, or the lack of education I had with abstinence only education. And it's such a powerful tool that I think everyone should have the opportunity to learn or engage with if they want to. And next slide. So yeah, thank you for listening. I really loved my time with IIGH, and I hope that if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat. But truly, if you have any desire to just either advocate for or learn about education related to SRHR, you should definitely reach out to IIGH. Wonderful opportunities, wonderful skill sets, wonderful faculty. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kaya, for sharing about your experiences, both at the personal and professional level. Next, I'd like to ask Claire, if you can please share about your experience.
Yeah, of course. Hi, I'm Claire Bogosian. I am a second-year medical student at Keck, and I had the opportunity to go abroad this summer with the Bremen Fellowship, and I went to Armenia and wanted to investigate a lot of the hypertension care that physicians were giving in rural areas. So next slide. So as I mentioned, I went abroad last summer, and I was able to really dive into what the Armenian healthcare system looks like, as well as learning how they approach hypertension in interesting and innovative ways. So hopefully I want to contribute further as a physician one day when I graduate, a very far future. In Armenia, I want to be able to work there and work in health advocacy as well. So next slide. So the project timeline was a little interesting. So basically, I lived in Armenia in 2021 during my gap year between when I graduated and when I started medical school. And I volunteered on an ambulance service with the organization Birthright Armenia. And I really saw a lot of different healthcare disparities when I was there, and got to, in Armenia, the physicians actually go out on the ambulances and treat the patients in their homes. So I was able to really see what life was like for a lot of these patients, and it was very eye-opening. And fast forward to August, I started medical school, and basically everyone around me was talking about research, and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but I knew I kind of wanted to work with something having to do with Armenia. And I was lucky enough to find some mentors that really helped me put this project together. And I ended up drafting an IRB. So at first it was all very hypothetical, just asking my mentors what kind of projects were needed in country, what was culturally sensitive, and then also what I could even bring to the table as a student. And then finally submitted both the Bremen fellowship application and then IRB. And since I was only interviewing physicians, I was able to apply for IRB exempt status, which made it a lot easier. And then, yeah, so in May, I basically just iterated on the interview guide that I was going to be using to investigate hypertension care in Armenia. And ended up receiving the IRB exempt approval. And then I found a translator in June and got Armenian NIH approval. So I had to get IRB approval basically in both countries. And then found housing with Birthright Armenia. So I was able to use the connections I had from when I lived there, and then was able to conduct interviews from June through July. And then I came back and worked with a medical student online from the Yerevan State University just to help with transcripts and doing the data analysis. And now I'm still working on the manuscript. So next slide. So just for a little bit of background, the percentage of hypertension in Armenia is very high. It's 35.8%, and only 6.6% of that is controlled. So it's a really big issue and something that I wanted to learn more about. So that's why I decided on doing this project. Next slide. Thank you. So yeah, I basically wanted to do in-depth interviews with physicians to figure out what it was like working with these patients, get their perceptions, and figure out what some of the challenges and solutions were when it came to hypertension care. So I ended up going to both the Shirak and Lori provinces and went to a lot of the rural areas and found the clinics through the municipality's website. So all of the information was online, and so that was really helpful. So we just basically called them up and asked if we could come interview, and most people said yes. And yeah, so the inclusion and exclusion criteria I'll go over next. So next slide, please. So it was basically just physicians that have been working in rural Armenia for a while. I set it at least 3 months, and also physicians that treat hypertension patients. So very like basic inclusion criteria, and we were able to find quite a few. So next slide, please. This was the interview guide development process. So we ended up choosing these sections to go over basically what demographic information, how they manage hypertension, what lifestyle modifications they generally recommend, whether they see a lot of resistant hypertension, and then like just perceptions of what the hypertension care is like. Next slide, please. So we actually got 24 interviews, which was way more than I was expecting. So I was super excited about that. And the range was also pretty wide, just because some doctors actually had to go to see patients. So next slide. And yeah, so the results, I did inductive qualitative analysis. So basically just read through all the data and found the major themes. And these were some of the major themes. I'll go into them further in the next slide. So next slide. So the main challenges that we found were a lot of the physicians were talking about patient non-compliance, especially in lifestyle modifications. And then there was a lot of mistrust in medical providers. So you can read the quotes. Basically, it's really hard to get patients to exclude certain foods from their diets. Also, a lot of the male patients smoke in Armenia. So a lot of them won't even go to the doctor because they'll ask them to stop smoking. So they'll just avoid the doctor altogether. Next slide. And then there's also the threat of war and natural disasters. So there have been recent wars in Armenia, and that has really left a permanent impact on the population. And so if you read some of these quotes, you can see it's very sad what's going on. If you don't know, there was also a recent Artsakh war, where basically all the Armenian population left Artsakh recently, and now they have like 100,000 refugees in Armenia. So this is definitely going to be something that needs to be addressed. So next slide. There's also a lot about socioeconomic barriers. So a lot of patients either can't afford the medications, can't afford the newer, more innovative medications, or they have some money, but they would rather spend it on agricultural activities and things that will eventually make them money. So yeah, it's hard to convince patients to invest in their health is what a lot of it was coming up with. But there was also a lot of solutions there, with a lot of physicians recommending humanitarian programs to provide patients with free medication. Next slide, please. Yeah, and then we moved into some solutions that were provided. So what I found were some rural specific modifications that a lot of physicians made, because there is a lot of like heavy labor that's being done. Some physicians actually talked about how they advise the patients to sit and stand, and so they wouldn't like stress the body in certain areas. And then they basically also recommended certain times of the day for them to take their blood pressure medication. So it would make it easier for them to like stay out in the fields longer. Next slide, please. And then patient education was a really big one. They all mostly mentioned this, and it was a lot about like educating people when they're younger, so they learn as they grow up to value health. And then also just like spending a lot of time with patients to explain what's going to happen if they start blood pressure medications and so forth. Next slide. And one really interesting innovative solution that was proposed, or that actually already happens, is one of the physicians mentioned that they organize courses and events that they bring patients with all the same like ailment together, in this case hypertensive patients, and have them share their experiences of complications that they went through. So if one patient had a stroke, the other can kind of see what it was like for them, and it motivates them to be more conscious of their health. So I thought that was really interesting and definitely innovative. Next slide. And then also in Armenia, they have something called polypills, where they have multiple antihypertensive medications in one formulation. So this also helps when the like medication regimen gets too complicated. It's easier for patients to be consistent with their medication if they're just taking one pill. Next slide. So yeah, in conclusion, this basically taught me a lot about the Armenian healthcare system, especially in terms of the hypertension management in specifically rural Armenia. And I'm really excited to really dive into this data further and hopefully work with my in-country contact more to find more ways to hopefully elevate the innovation that's in Armenia with hypertension care. Next slide. So some advice, just seek out mentors. They really helped me through this project, and just don't be afraid to apply yourself. I know it's easy to have a lot of self-doubt. I definitely did, but yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions later. And yeah, next slide. And then you can just kind of flip through these. These are just pictures from my trip. Yeah, but thank you so much. I appreciate it. Let me know if you have any questions. Oh, that picture got marked. Thank you so much to my mentors.
Thank you very much, Claire, for sharing with us your research journey. What an interesting project. I will ask real quick, can you also share a little bit about how engaging in this research project through the Bremen Fellowship has impacted kind of your career professionally?
Definitely, yeah. This was actually like my first research project that I've done all by myself, and it was so immensely impactful, and it showed me I'm able to do something like this in the future, like do research that like I want to do and learn what I want to learn in the context of Armenia, because there aren't a lot of like Armenian specific like research and clinical experiences. And as a physician, I hope to do a lot of global health work in Armenia. So this was just like the perfect combination of research and learning and being in Armenia for a summer as like a researcher. And it was all because of the Bremen Fellowship. So I'm super grateful, and it is definitely going to help me in the future, hopefully, as I work as a physician.
Great. Thank you so much, Claire. Really appreciate it. And now I have the pleasure to turn it over to Andy.
Hi, everyone. Can you guys, all right. So my name is Andy. Thank you all for having me today. I'm a second-year medical student at Keck, and I'm part of Dr. Jeffrey Klausner's research group here in the Division of Inequalities of Global Health within the Departments of Population and Public Health Sciences. And before I kind of go into my project, I just really want to thank Dr. Bremen for his generous gift, and also thank his family as well, and as well as the IIGH for just providing this incredible opportunity for me over the past summer. Next slide. So going into just some background on syphilis and what my project entails. So syphilis is a growing public and global health challenge with increased incidence around the world over the past few decades. It's a sexually transmitted infection caused by this spiral-shaped bacteria in the corner. And in the United States, we've seen a resurgence of syphilis and really high cases of congenital syphilis over the past decade, which is really sad because it's preventable and we have treatments for it. But if we look at the world map here, there's actually a disproportionate impact on low and middle income countries, and congenital syphilis is actually a leading cause of stillbirths and congenital infections in these settings. And within these settings, there's also limited microbiological diagnostics, so like molecular testing that we have available here. So a lot of the data is currently really underrepresented. So next slide. So the project that I was involved in is kind of nested in this large scale study that my PI is involved in. And his is kind of a cross-sectional study collecting clinical specimens from patients who come in with suspected symptoms of syphilis at different healthcare facilities in Southern Africa. And by doing this, we hope to kind of better assess the epidemiology of syphilis in Southern Africa. But there are also many different sub-studies that we're engaged in. And the main one that I've been involved in is kind of extracting the syphilis DNA and then doing whole genome sequencing to better understand like the syphilis genome itself and looking into the molecular regions to guide vaccine development efforts, and also study kind of the distribution and diversity of syphilis strains through phylogenetics, because the bacteria itself, there's there's like two main different strains, and from different parts of the world, we might see different distributions of syphilis. So next slide. Yeah, and for my fellowship, I was able to go out to Southern Africa, and I went to East London, South Africa, and this is in the Eastern Cape province of South Africa, which is one of the most economically challenged parts of the country. And this was through the Foundation for Professional Development. And I also went out to Gaborone, Botswana, which is the capital of Botswana, and that was through the Botswana Harvard Health Partnership. And this was made possible because my PI has had longstanding collaborations with these organizations for many years. Next slide. And so just going into kind of the role and timeline of how things panned out. And I joined the lab about a little over a year ago now. And when I first came up, I had a background in like microbiology and immunology, looking at kind of the basic science of different infectious diseases. So when I went to Dr. Klausner, he had this brand new project that just got grant approval, but there wasn't like much done for like the IRBs. And so he kind of introduced me to the roles as a study coordinator to kind of learn how to coordinate a study from the ground up, which was super informative for kind of like my future career as like someone who's interested in like doing research and also working as a clinician. So through this, I kind of helped build the research documents before the trip, and I was kind of like the middleman between all the investigators in Southern Africa and here. And during my fellowship, I developed these education and training materials and also did a lot of site visits, which I'll go into in the next slide. Next slide, sorry. Yeah, so here's me going out to Botswana, and it was just so incredible to meet everyone in person. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so in Botswana, I kind of introduced our study to the staff, and together with the lead research nurse, we actually went out to 5 different government-based and university-based clinics to meet with the matrons and also the clinicians on site to kind of assess what they thought about our study and how we can implement it into all these facilities that are going on. And we really appreciate their feedback, and it was really like helpful to like go out there and just talk with them, because it allowed me to really contextualize our study to the local setting. Next slide. And similarly, this was also something that I did in South Africa. I just went out with Dr. Peters here, and we just went out to the different clinics in the urban areas and also a lot of the rural clinics, where it was really difficult to kind of see the disparities that kind of occur in sub-Saharan Africa and like the really long wait times. And it was just really kind of impactful for me to kind of see this unique setting So through this, we were able to just meet with all the local staff and just get everything in check to like begin collection of the specimens. Next slide. And so in addition to kind of the study coordination aspects, the parts that I'm mostly leading are kind of looking into like the molecular biology of the syphilis. So once we get a lot of the syphilis samples, we want to look into these very specific outer membrane proteins of syphilis, which are kind of known to be the key vaccine candidates. And vaccine development for syphilis is kind of a priority right now, especially with a lot of the surging cases, and there's just been a shortage of like the primary treatment for syphilis as well. So this has just been a super like really cool experience to kind of delve into. Next slide. And as part of the fellowship, I also had this laboratory-based component where I went out to the Botswana Harvard HIV reference laboratory, and I was able to meet Dr. Sipulile Moyo, who's actually the laboratory director and a famous scientist who discovered and sequenced the Omicron variant of COVID back in November 2021. So through this fellowship, I was able to train under his pathogen genomics team, be familiarized with a lot of the sequencing technologies like Oxford nanopore technologies and also the brand new Illumina machine that they got. So I think it was really cool to be able to just continue engaging in like cutting edge science as a medical student, because a lot of our work is also in the clinic, but it's great to see how like science can inform medical treatments and practices as well. Next slide. So yeah, just reflecting on this experience, I felt like it's been very inspiring for like a future career in infectious diseases, global health, and epidemiology. Felt like it was also a really like amazing experience for personal growth, because it was kind of my first time going out there on my own to like a brand new country, multiple countries actually, and then meeting a lot of incredible people, trying new foods. And I definitely look forward to pursuing the global health and research electives in my medical school curriculum to continue building on the project that I've started here. Yep. Next slide. As for advice for students interested in global health research, I'd suggest to first define your interests and goals within global health, whether that's research or clinical work or like public health programming. And definitely explore and engage in the opportunities that the IIGH offers. And this symposium with my amazing co-panelists kind of highlights a lot of really cool opportunities going on at the IIGH. And lastly, don't be afraid to just go out and network and seek mentorship. Because I know it might be intimidating at first, but if you're really interested in something, I feel like a lot of the faculty here are really supportive and willing to kind of really support your career development goals. So don't be afraid to reach out. And you can reach out to me and as well if you're interested in working with our group as well. So next slide. I think that concludes my presentation on my fellowship experience. So thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Andy. That was lovely to hear about your experience and your reflections. I'm now going to turn it over to Anju, if you can share about yours.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. Hi, everyone. My name is Anju Kane, and I am a second-year doctoral student in the Health Behavior Research Program in Keck. I also graduated with my MPH from USC in 2020 with a concentration in global health, and I am the current chair of the IIGH Student Advisory Council. So I'm really happy to be here today and to share a little bit more about my experiences with the Institute and within global health. Next slide, please. So just a brief overview. I only have 10 minutes, but in those 10 minutes, I'm going to touch on my participation in the Geneva course in 2018, my practicum experience in Malawi, my experience as the chair of SAC this year, and just a little bit about my current global health research. Next slide. So in 2018, I had the opportunity to travel to Switzerland to participate in the Global Health Governance and Diplomacy and Practice course. And I just want to mention that this course is actually a primary reason why I applied to USC for my MPH. So being able to actually go was the best thing ever for me. And it was definitely a highlight of my time in the MPH program. I also want to show off the picture of Dr. Tedros and I, because that is my self-proclaimed claim to fame. And he was probably the busiest man at the World Health Assembly that day, but it just meant a lot that he actually stopped to take the picture with me. So all of those pictures on that slide here are just pictures from the trip. Next slide, please. So there are so many great things about the trip, but these are some of my personal highlights. So first, the year that I went, the WHO Department of Reproductive Health and Research and the Special Program for Human Reproduction convened a consultation with young health professionals on self-initiated interventions for sexual and reproductive health and rights. And our group actually had the opportunity to participate with a small group of other students and have in-depth discussion and interprofessional dialogue on this new field of work. It was newer at the time. And what was really special about this session was that the WHO employees actually gave us as students a platform to share our thoughts, and they took notes on what we were saying. And I think that it really just helped us to feel like we had a voice. Obviously, another highlight was actually attending the World Health Assembly and taking notes on the sessions as a delegate for the World Heart Federation, and just being able to observe how high-level meetings at the UN operate was really amazing to me. And this was a core memory of my career as both a public health student and professional. And just in general, the energy around the assembly was just really cool to witness. I think I was drinking like 4 to 5 shots of espresso a day, which I would not recommend, but I was having such a good time. So I wanted to be awake for everything and attend all the external sessions. So if I had to be on the go from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., I was going to make it happen while I was on that trip. And then last, I really enjoyed this trip because I was able to network and have one-on-one conversations with other global health students and professionals from around the world. So in the picture, I think on your right, I'm in the picture with a few other students that were representing the International Federation of Medical Students Association, and they were all from different countries, but I actually still keep in touch with 2 of the people from that photo. We also were able to visit other global health institutions and organizations like Gavi, UNAIDS, the World Trade Organization. And on those visits, we were able to have small group conversations with the staff that work there. And I took many business cards, and I was very convinced that during that trip that I was moving to Geneva afterward. But it was just cool to have that space. I think while I was there, I was also able to speak pretty in-depthly with the Minister of Health from Barbados and a few other health ministers from smaller countries in the Caribbean. And being able to have those conversations really helped me to put what it would look like to work in countries with health infrastructures that vastly different from the US into perspective. So I really gained some invaluable knowledge and insight while I was on this trip. And then the last thing that I want to mention about this is that while I was in Switzerland, I did some solo traveling. I took a trip to Lauterbrunnen and the Netherlands, and that was really the first time that I had ever traveled to foreign countries or cities completely alone. And I think that that helped to give me the confidence to travel and live in Lilongwe, Malawi for my practicum by myself. And so thank you. Yeah, thank you. So now I just want to talk about my practicum for a little bit. In spring 2020, I worked with Luke International Norway and the Malawi Ministry of Health on a project called the Kuniga Project. And this was an opportunity that I was able to have because of the mentorship from USC global health professors like Dr. Withers, who also has an affiliation with IIGH. I also really enjoyed my time in Malawi. Waking up and going to an office in the center of Lilongwe every day was kind of a real experience, surreal experience for me, but it helped me to solidify that that was really what I would like my future as a global health professional to look like. And every day was really unpredictable. I feel like there were always some new challenges thrown at me. Sometimes our office would have running water, sometimes it wouldn't. Sometimes we'd have power, sometimes we wouldn't. But it was just all a part of the experience. And another big part of that was that I was there right when COVID was surfacing, and we really didn't know much about COVID yet. And so I really felt like I was in the midst of global health in action. So it was definitely an unforgettable experience. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to talk about SAC. So SAC is the Student Advisory Council for IIGH, and we are a student group made up of 10 students from across the university. Students apply and are selected for membership. Some of us are graduate students, some are undergrads, and there are a range of majors and fields of study. So we have students studying policy, history, pharmacy, business, health communication, environmental studies, the list goes on. And the multidisciplinary aspect of SAC is actually one of my favorite parts about it. But essentially, we are a group of students with a passion for global health, and we focus on supporting and promoting IIGH events, but also on creating a space to have dialogue with one another about our interests and our respective fields and how they relate to global health. And on the screen, you can see two pictures, two former SAC members, and then a few of the current SAC members now. But as chair of SAC this year, I've been really focused on trying to ensure SAC membership feels like an enriching experience for this year's group. So at our monthly meetings, we've had members present on their current global health research or fellowships. We've had a young professional come in and he presented about his journey and work with the CDC office in Malawi. Just yesterday, we had a lunch and learn with Dr. Kumar and had the chance to have an intimate Q&A session with her about her academic and professional journey. And we've also been able to take some time to brainstorm on what we'd like to see from the Institute as students. I think SAC is really beneficial because it gives USC students opportunities to shape IIGH student programming. I think that SAC helps us to develop leadership skills that are relevant to future careers in global health. Through SAC, we're able to have small group conversations with IIGH faculty and staff that maybe we wouldn't be able to have otherwise. And we are able to have dedicated time and space to learn from one another and have conversations on essential global health issues and topics. So for me, being a member of SAC last year as a member and then as chair this year has been really fun, and it's been a collaborative experience. And I would encourage students that are interested in global health to apply for next year when applications open next spring. And next slide, please. And last, as for my current research, some of the directed research work I'm doing is related to perinatal depression screening in sub-Saharan Africa. And we are looking at the burden of PND in the region, identifying methodological challenges that are occurring, and working to provide recommendations for improving systematic PND screening and treatment to overall improve the health of women and infants. And next slide, please. And that's it for me. Thank you so much. I left my email on the slide, so please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Anju, for sharing all your diverse experiences that you've had with the Institute. We're now going to take a few questions. I see one of the first questions. Hi, all. The presentations were amazing, and you all are so inspiring. My question is for all the panelists. Was there ever a moment where you felt imposter syndrome, and how did you overcome this?
I can speak to that. I think that's a great question. I feel imposter syndrome all of the time, and I actually find it very difficult to not feel imposter syndrome. But I think that just acknowledging that I've worked hard to have all these experiences and that I'm in the space that I'm meant to be in, I think that helps me to kind of deal with it. And yeah, I guess that's the best way for me to answer that.
I can add really quickly. I very much agree, but I think also Willella said this wonderfully in her presentation. We're always learning, and especially in a topic like sexual rights and reproductive health, there's always so much learning and growth to do. And I think it's just really important to acknowledge, like, yes, there's so much learning to do, but also like I've learned so much and I am learning so much in this process. And that is something to truly be appreciative and grateful of.
I also can add, this was my first time like as I mentioned, doing a project like this, and that came with a lot of imposter syndrome. Like the whole time I was thinking, I don't know whether this is something that I can do. But at the end of the day, I really worked on like finding the right people to help me get where I wanted to go. So finding mentors that really did know what was going on and getting advice from them and figuring it out. Okay, like I can do this with like them by my side. So that really helped.
Definitely, I definitely feel that, Claire. I was like in the same boat. It's like a huge project and you're really not sure what to do. And just having really nice supportive mentors is definitely the way to go. But also embracing like the mindset that you're here to learn and you're always like a learner. I feel like it could also be a way to kind of ameliorate some of those feelings of imposter syndrome.
Yeah, and I can just quickly add everything that everyone said is super true and valid. I feel like for me, like I still face it to this day. I was literally just discussing it with my roommates, and I think being okay with that and acknowledging it and just creating, at least something that helps me is always creating small goals for myself. So then it might be something I have to live with, but just taking it like one day at a time is super important, and acknowledge your successes. Like you're already doing so many amazing things.
Thanks all. I know there's a lot of questions in the chat. We have time for one more, and then a few of them I'll address quickly right afterwards. But this question is coming about how did you find mentors and figure out what you wanted to research? So maybe if two people can take this.
I can jump in really quickly. So I actually I went to Berkeley and they had an Armenian professionals mentor program. So if you can join like a program like that, it wasn't even with faculty, it was with medical students. So I was paired with a UCSF medical student, and basically I'd never met him in person, but we did a Zoom call. And then a year later, when I contacted him about this, I had known that he had done a lot of work in Armenia. So I basically just asked him if he knew anyone. So, and then had him introduce me to that person on and through an email. So always having like that, it helps to not have to cold email, and having like a connection in between really helps.
I can speak from an undergraduate level. I think for me, like it is a lot of cold emailing because unfortunately, like those connections may not be as built yet. One thing for me, like the SDG Leadership Academy, I was really fortunate for that to be a connecting point for like Dr. Gerskin, Dr. Anderson, like all the lovely people that hosted that. But even if you don't, like, there's nothing wrong with cold emailing. And I would like to say, like, IIGH is always looking for people who are really passionate or interested in learning more to help. So just send an email with what you're interested in, like ask if you can set up time, and like that is the best place to start.
Great, thank you. I'm going to ask Caitlin if we can just put up this slide again around education opportunities. I see quite a few questions related to how can we get involved. So first and foremost, sign up for the IIGH newsletter. Please go to our website. The newsletter announces all of these opportunities as they're happening, whether it's speaker series, whether it's fellowships, it's courses. Yes, we do plan to offer the Geneva course this upcoming summer. I see that in one of the questions. So please keep a lookout for that in the spring. It'll be announced to start the applications. Also, in terms of how to get involved with the SAC, as Andrew mentioned, the applications open up in spring as well. And you should certainly all come to the events. That's one of the best ways to get involved, is come to these speaker series, because you can meet each other. You can meet, amazing speakers. And so definitely encourage you to come to our events. Also, I mentioned the Global Health Case Competition. That's a lot of fun. We have sometimes 50 to 100 students from across the university participating. So that's coming up this February, on February 23rd. Again, in the spring, you'll see a bunch of announcements go out around these opportunities. So you heard from a diverse group of students about all the various types of education opportunities they engaged in through the Institute, whether it was self-directed research that students had an interest in themselves, or it was research that they partnered with through our faculty, or going on courses to Geneva, or participating in fellowships and internships. And so there's really a wide variety. You can work anywhere in the world, whether it's Los Angeles, as you heard from some of our students, or different parts of the world. And so please sign up for our website, get involved, email us. We're here. This is what we're here for, is to service you, and we hope to have lots of engagement. Thank you, everyone. One more plug. So we have our next upcoming speaker series event is on the WHO Safe Abortion Guidelines. It's going to be on November 29th. So that would be a great one to sign up for. With that, I'm going to close out the event. I want to thank all of our student panelists today. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to share your experiences with us and your insights. And we very much appreciate it and hope to hear from more and more students.